Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Seesaw podcast. And today we've got an incredibly important topic to discuss, which is what do we do about our current situation and what is the state of the world and how do we combat this? Because previously we addressed the question of why we're fighting against the mandates, why we are trying to set the world free, so to speak, because the things we're seeing in countries like Australia and Austria and Germany, as we've mentioned in our previous podcasts, that it's not something that we want to see here in Canada. And I wanted to discuss what can we do as individuals and as a group of people who are fighting for liberty and fighting for freedom and fighting for the rights that we were born with. What is your first impression of that, and what are your first thoughts on that question?
Well, I don't think there's one answer for that. There's not this one magical solution to this problem. I think this issue is kind of something that's been building up over a long period of time. And the mindset and kind of cultural and social aspect of all this is something that's been building up for quite a while, that we have to I guess tackle this from several different angles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just going to be like, okay, here's this thing that if we do it, this is all going to go away. There's no one answer, and frankly, neither of us or any of us have the answer to how to fight these mandates or just free, I guess, ourselves from the state that we are in currently as a society, as a country. But I think that's why it's important that we are going to have this discussion on trying to figure out what those angles should be, which, I guess, solutions or which tactics work better than others, which ones we should focus on, because some will be more beneficial than others will. Some may work, some may not. If you look at, history, certain things have worked, certain things haven't. So I think that it's a combination of a bunch of different things, and I don't think there's like one answer. And I don't even think, I don't have the answer. You don't have the answer to what exactly.
Not yet.
Not yet. We're trying to figure it out.
We're trying to figure it out. We're probing different strategies, different ideas. And it seems like a lot of the groups are not really unified under one
No.
thing that works.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing their own thing. Another group is doing something else, and that's it. It is a bit of a. It is a bit sad because I think it's a detriment to the whole movement that everybody's fighting it, not being unified under
Mm-hmm.
one strategy, because everybody thinks they got the solution on how to defeat this. Like I've heard some people are, trying to draw in little circles in those QR codes, and the whole system will magically crash and
Wait,
everything.
really?
Yeah, like it's going around in the groups,
Yeah.
right? But those things are ridiculous. But
Mm-hmm.
some people believe in that, and they literally walk around with markers and they start marking down these QR codes, but it's silly. But what the premise is the whole movement is very divided. Nobody's really unified under one thing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we got to do protests. We got to do civil disobedience, or
Mm-hmm.
we got to do this, not comply. Everybody's doing their own
Mm-hmm.
avenues, and one group is doing this, it's not working, another group is doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a huge shortcoming of our movement is that we're not unified under one cause.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting together to discuss what works best.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's just kind of plugged into their own ideas and their own ideologies,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody's going to listen to anybody else of what's working.
Yeah.
Nobody's curious about those things. They're
Mm-hmm.
just trying to promote their own agendas, so to speak, just like the government is doing on the other side. So I think it is a shortcoming, but that is something to address in, I guess, another discussion. Let's talk about protests. Let's begin
Mm-hmm.
with that, because I think a lot of people have the idea that protests would solve everything. And
Mm-hmm.
if we have a problem in our society, throughout history, in movies, in literature, it is shown that We just get together, get our signs, get our flags, go to the capital of our country and start yelling at the government and demanding our rights back. So, what do you think about those?
I think there are pros and cons. For protests, do they really change anything policy wise? I don't think so. I think one thing that they may do is they do bring people together that are, I guess, fighting for the same thing, for the same cause, which is great
Mm-hmm.
because connecting online can be difficult. So when you actually go to an event like a protest and you get to communicate with people that are, I guess like-minded or fighting for the same thing, whatever, that can definitely be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that it actually makes any significant changes. And a lot of people can take things that happen, or the media can take things that happen at protests out of context, or they often highlight the negative things, or for certain movements, I guess. Um,
They spin it out of context all the
yeah.
time. Yeah.
So I know for this, I guess, movement specifically, I think protests have been more detrimental to our to our image, to the public,
Mm-hmm.
than they have benefited us. Um,
Possibly.
yeah, but I don't think they make any significant change. I mean, we've been having these worldwide rallies, right? Is that what they're called?
Yeah,
Worldwide,
worldwide, right? Yeah.
in several different cities around the world, like once a month, I think it is.
Mm-hmm. Once in a
Has
couple
it?
of months, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. They're big. There's a lot of people that go to these in a lot of different places around the world, but has it significantly changed anything? No.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of brought people together, but I don't think it's made any significant changes.
Can you elaborate on bringing people together?
Well, especially for a situation like this where a lot of people feel like they're alone,
Mm-hmm.
and when the mainstream media or the government is feeding you this certain narrative or making you feel like you should not believe the things you believe in, it 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 can be really hard for an individual. Um, for myself, I felt that way until I went to my first protest downtown, the rally,
Mm-hmm.
where I actually met. I think I've mentioned this before, but
You
where I
mentioned.
met CSONT, the CSONT group. But so in that way, like that really helped me because I got to meet people my age going through the same things I'm going through, which is great and has helped me in so many ways. And I think that that's doing that for a lot of other people as well. I
Mm-hmm.
so I think it just brings together people that are going through the same thing or fighting for the same thing that maybe feel alone or maybe feel like they're a minority. I think it helps in that sense. What about like what do you think in terms of protests?
Well, do you think it brings new people in? Does it grow numbers?
Mm, I actually don't know. I guess it can. I mean,
Like
it brought
people that
me in.
are right, but people that are on the fence, let's say, about this, and they're kind of like skeptical.
Maybe not because I still held true to the same beliefs that and I guess convictions that I have to this day. I felt that before I was involved in anything like Concerned Students of Ontario or
Mm-hmm.
going to protests or whatever. I still felt that way. It wasn't like I was on the fence. I just was kind of hiding it. But in that sense, I maybe not. People who aren't sure about this whole thing and this whole narrative and all these mandates and regulations, people who are kind of on the fence, I don't know if they would be the ones to go to protests.
Okay. Because so I've read a book called The Crowd.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Study of the Popular Mind. And in this book, it talks about the crowd, meaning like protests, gatherings, and what they do, and how individuals behave when they are within a crowd of
Mm-hmm.
people, and how people behave when they're outside the crowd, and what and once they see something. So the premise regarding like people who are like on the fence and that are you know, they can go one way or the other, is that they would be attracted to the crowd because the crowd is contagious.
That's actually interesting. So then maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was an interesting point that it talked about there. Now tell me what you think about civil disobedience.
Well, I think that's pretty much one of the only ways to really change anything, to make any significant real change, is just not complying with the policies or whatever that's in place. If enough people just were like, no, I don't agree with this, I am not going to follow it, it wouldn't be sustainable for the government to keep implementing it if so many people were against it.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, businesses. If 50% or of businesses during lockdowns, during like the fourth lockdown we had, were just like, no, this is enough. I want to run my business. I have the right to keep my business open. I'm going to stay open. If most businesses actually just did that, what can the government, are they going to fine every single business that decides to do that, or they're going to have no other choice but to let them stay open if the majority of businesses actually just said, no, I'm not complying with this, it's enough is enough, we've gone through the lockdowns already, it hasn't worked, I want to keep my business open. Or if enough students decide, who didn't want to get vaccinated in the first place or don't want to disclose their medical information to the school at the beginning of the semester, if they just said, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not going to attend your school, if enough people did that, the school would lose a significant amount of money. And would they then keep these policies in place and lose all this tuition? Or would they have no other choice but to cave and say, okay, fine, you guys can all come back to school? You know, like, yeah. I think that might be one of the best ways to put an end to all of this, is just saying no, and enough people just saying no.
Right. Yeah, and that could work on any industry, any workplace, any
Oh, for sure, for anything.
anything in society where there are rules. Like you got to enforce boundaries, whether we're talking about the individual level or society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The people have to enforce boundaries between the people and the government. And whenever the government overreaches, it is responsibility of the citizen to enforce those boundaries and to say, no, enough is enough. This is where I draw the line. You can't go any further. So you're going to have to take a step back, and you're going to have to meet some of my demands in order to have a functioning society. Because otherwise, if nobody's following the rules, nobody's complying, then they have no effect, right? They can't just lock everybody up or punish everybody. So I think civil disobedience is one of the most effective ways. It is the most effective way, in my opinion, to counter those effects of conformity and the effects of brutal force.
Yeah. For example, like if you go into a grocery store and you see someone not wearing a mask, if you think that it's unnecessary for you to wear a mask, but you wear one anyways because you don't want people to look at you funny or to be told, yelled at by an employee or whatever it may be.
You don't want a confrontation.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you see other people not wearing a mask, it might motivate you to do the same. Hey, if those people can do it, I can do it too. So a part of this non-compliance is the more people do it, the more people will start following that, because they will feel more inclined to say, you know what, no, this doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't align with what I believe in, or whatever it may be. So when they see someone else doing it, it might encourage them.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we need that person. We need someone to be that first person, right? To take off the mask,
exactly.
Right? So, but I think you're right. It is the most efficient way to, I guess, make any change, and then to encourage more people to do it as well.
Yeah, because what is the government going to do? The
Exactly.
people hold all the power.
They
It's
do.
not the government. It's not
Hmm.
their force or their rules or their laws. It's really the people
Hmm.
that can decide what they want to do, how they want to live, and how they want society to function.
Hmm.
And currently, what we have going on is society is deciding to put the power in the hands of a few individuals,
Hmm.
which is everything that we were taught against.
Yeah.
But the reality is that most people are okay with this. They're okay
Hmm.
with the government handling things for them. They're okay with the government setting these mandates and telling people what to do.
I think that's also because that's the easier way out.
Yeah, it's easy to just say nothing and comply.
Yeah, for sure. Which is why we are where we are. I mean,
That's the reason we're here.
if if enough of us, the government can try and implement whatever they want, but it's up to us to decide whether that's actually going to happen.
That's right. Yeah.
We we could have been out of this for a while
Yeah.
if enough of us just decided it's time for this to end.
Hmm. So I wanted to go into something that's a little bit off topic, but I think
Hmm.
it is really crucial to talk about because in order to answer the question what to do about it and what strategies to implement, we have to know what the situation is like and how did we get here and
Hmm.
why are we in this situation in the first place. And so in my opinion, from the research that I have been doing and trying to understand the movement that we're in terms of the ideologies of the left political spectrum
Hmm.
and the woke culture and all of
Hmm.
those things. Why is it so appealing to most people? Again, I'm going to quote from the book. I'm
Hmm.
going to find the exact page and talk about it. So this is the book for the viewers who are trying to see. This is something you can still get on Amazon. It's not banned or
Not
anything like
yet.
that. But this book really describes how people behave in crowds. So I
Hmm.
think what happened with our society is the media plays a major role.
Hmm.
And they created this artificial crowd by saying, oh, most people in this poll, most people think mandates are good.
Hmm.
Although that might not be the case because I mean, I didn't vote in the poll.
Right.
Like, you see what I mean? The poll could be biased. It
Hmm.
could have asked a leading question. The poll could have only taken answers from certain group of people, or they could have just taken interviews from a certain group of people, right? And so their opinions are biased towards the narrative they want to push. And what this created is an artificial crowd of people. And what happens in crowds is, so here quoting from the book, it says, in a crowd, every sentiment and act is contagious, and contagious to such a degree that an individual readily sacrifices his personal interest to the collective interest. And this is something written like over 100 years ago,
Wow. Well.
stating how things work in crowds. And I think you don't need a physical crowd anymore. You don't need people gathering outside yelling ideas.
Hmm.
You just need the media to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And people think, oh, I'm part of this group of people. They associate with that. You put a mask on. You're part of those group of people. You're conforming to that. You're part of the crowd.
Hmm.
You walk inside your Costco or Walmart or whatever, everybody's wearing a mask. They are part of a crowd, just like they would have been 100 years ago on the streets yelling and protesting.
Hmm.
And so when you're part of this crowd, again, it says you sacrifice your personal interest to the collective good.
That's exactly what's
Yeah.
exactly what's happening. I mean, they created this idea that if you follow all these rules, it's for the greater good, right? Like it just says in that quote.
Mm-hmm.
So people will go against the things that maybe they believe in, or yeah, the things that their convictions, to fulfill that, so that they, it's for the greater good. I'm doing a great thing.
Yes. So furthermore, what it says here, there's a lot of interesting things, but another one, it says the sentiment of responsibility, which always controls individuals, disappears entirely when they're part of a group. Then it goes further on to talk about um, the isolated individual versus when that individual is part of a group. So it in the way they act as well, and this could justify why some people, even though they're presented with hard facts, this is not about your health, like a hard fact of, hey, this is not that bad, right? They are not gonna listen to the facts because they're part of a crowd that thinks a completely different way, and they would rather conform to that than open their mind to the truth. And there's a reason for that. It says, isolated, an individual, isolated, he may be cultivated individual. In a crowd, he is a barbarian. That is a creature acting by instinct. And so what it talks about instincts is, in general, the way it discussed it is that our instinct to be part of a group, to be part of a society, to be part of a community is an instinct because it increases reproductive success, etc. And seeking truth is not an instinct. That is just your intellectual, your thinking brain. But that thinking brain is not overriding the instincts. The instincts of hungry, I need to eat, I need to reproduce, etc. Those animal instincts are going to always override your logical brain. And therefore, a lot of people don't want the truth. They don't care about the truth. What they care about is fulfilling their basic human needs.
For sure.
So what do you think of that?
Well, I think that's everything you just said is very, very accurate. I think it's also that it's difficult to open your mind up to something that maybe you haven't thought of before. It's so much easier to just have the same mindset and just keep following that no matter what the cost is. For some of these people, it's, losing their own rights and freedoms. I mean, they are, uploading proof of vaccination to a QR code so you can enter a restaurant still isn't normal life. So even if it means sacrificing that, they want to be, it's easier to, like you said, fit in with the crowd. I mean, there's this, everyone tries to be so politically correct nowadays. And, if you go against any of that or say something that someone doesn't like to hear, you're labeled as something negative, right? So people try to avoid that. And because why would they want to go through that? Why do they want people to look at them in this negative light? So they just, conform. And it's so prevalent nowadays, especially with social media, because you see things on the internet that are like, oh, these anti-maskers, or oh, these anti-vaxxers, and then they're like, I don't want to be a part of that group, right? I don't want to be associated with those terrible people. So they just keep going down the same path and following the same narrative, and just, I wonder how we can get people out of that.
You can't convince them with logic is what I'm saying here. And that's what the book is saying, is you cannot you don't need logic to convince a crowd. You need emotions. And people fall for emotions. And this is what is happening on the left, is that a lot of things are based on emotions, like, oh, help out the collective and be part of a collective. It's all good. We're just helping each other out. But as soon as you step out of line, oh, you're a fucking anti-vaxxer, you're this and that, you get the fuck out of here. You're not part of society anymore. So another thing that's pretty interesting is what it mentions. It says the conclusion to be drawn from this is that the crowd is always intellectually inferior to the isolated individual. So another shit aspect of all of this is that people who are already in the crowd, they're basically part of a cult, and you cannot pull them out of it very easily because they will not turn on their logical side of, oh, look, that's the fact. Okay, so I'm going to follow facts. Or look, this is legit the truth. There's hard proven facts of, you're given videos, you're given diagrams, everything is there. they're not going to succumb to that because they're going to be intellectually inferior being part of that group and associating themselves with that group. So as long as they keep wearing masks, as long as they keep complying to things, they are part of a group. They're part of a crowd. They're part of a cult, pretty much.
100%. And it doesn't help that that crowd, that group, is being labeled as the heroes, you know, the good people.
Well, that's what they do.
Right?
They glorify themselves and give praise to themselves for doing these things. That's kind of what keeps the motivation up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's the tragedy of the situation, because I think one thing to understand here is that we cannot force people to think a certain way.
No, of course not.
We cannot, drag them and tell them, no, you're not wearing a mask anymore. It's not going to happen. So and the way we approach this in terms of what to do about this is, I think we have to categorize it based on the people we're dealing with, our audience. So of course there's people that are on our side and they know what's going on. They're open to the facts, but they're not doing shit.
Yeah.
That's one category of people. Another big category of people is ones that are oblivious. They don't give a fuck what's going on, right? They don't care if they have to vaccinate. They don't care this. They don't care that. They're oblivious. And I think that's the majority of the population falls under that category. And then there's the category of like the promoters. Like they're heavily invested. They wear 3 masks. They're the first to line up for their jab. They go test every week.
Yeah.
Right? There's people like that. And what I think we have to categorize are the way we approach this is that you kind of have to leave those people alone. Right? The ones who are promoting this agenda, you just have to leave them alone, let them be, because if you are just throwing facts and logic at them, you're just further pulling them into the darkness.
Yeah, you're wasting your time because they won't listen.
Yeah, and we have to limit, because we have limited resources to fight this. And so we have to put our resources, our effort, and our energy and time into something that is efficient and that will work, and into the people that will actually do it. And so I think one of the main things we can focus on is the people who understand what's going on but aren't doing shit.
Yes, I think one of the important things that we have to focus on is reaching those people, and how can we encourage them to finally, come out of their hiding behind the internet and actually do something about what's going on. I think that's what we have to focus on, because we can't focus on changing people's minds that'll never agree with us. I mean, we can't force people, like you said, you can't force people to agree with us. I wouldn't want to force anyone to agree with us. But we have to just keep having these discussions and creating these platforms like we are to have these conversations, so that people can realize that, they're not alone, and it's time to actually step up and do something about it and come out of, hiding.
Come out of your shell.
Yeah, hiding in Telegram groups and in Discord groups or whatever it is. I mean, that's not going to change anything. It's just going to make the mental state of all of us worse. You can't just isolate yourself. And it's not going to help the cause in any way either. So I think we have to reach those people and encourage them to do the things like non-compliance and I mean, speaking up about everything.
Yeah.
I think that might have to be our focus.
Yeah, it could be. The thing is, non-compliance is not easy.
No.
It sounds very easy. Oh yeah, just don't do it. Well, it's really fucking hard because you're the only one not doing it. And I think one thing we can do to encourage people to begin not complying, if you are in your schools and you have a class in person, but you chose the online version, don't fucking do that. If you want to study in person, go in person and study in person like a regular human being that has paid for the service. You have the complete right to be there. And you will, inevitably what you do is that you give the chance to everybody else in the room to save themselves. Because for those who are on the fence or believe that masks are bullshit and they believe this is bullshit, they have the chance to remove their mask and support that one person
Mm-hmm.
that is doing service to our country.
Mm-hmm.
Support that one patriot that is going to walk in the classroom and say, no, I'm
Mm-hmm.
studying like a regular human being because that's what I believe in
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I deserve.
One of the other, I guess, aspects, like you mentioned kind of with the online school, one of the other sides of noncompliance is not accepting, like we've previously talked about, accommodations and
Mm-hmm.
exemptions, because that's still complying. You're still
Yep.
complying with the school's policy, your employees or employer's policy. You're still complying with it. So again, that will not change anything, and that's something that a lot of people that are, I guess you can say, on our side struggle with. They
Mm-hmm.
struggle with that fact that getting an exemption is not going to, it actually harms the cause.
It harms, yeah.
Getting a online accommodation, it harms the cause as well. That's another aspect of noncompliance. For some people, it may be hard to, not wear a mask in public settings and things like that. So if you aren't able to do something like that, you should instead try to avoid getting exemptions and accommodations and still going to your classes and or whatever it may be. So that's another thing. It's not just the
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and for those who still think that wearing a mask is, or not wearing a mask and showing up to a grocery store without a mask is too uncomfortable, I have news for you. The future is way more fucking
Yeah.
uncomfortable than what you're going to experience because
Mhm.
eventually, yeah, it's uncomfortable at first, but eventually you get used to it and you start looking at other people with masks and you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't know why they're still wearing those masks
Yeah.
when you've been going on without a mask for this whole time and nothing has happened to you. You haven't died, you haven't. So you mentioned another thing that's quite interesting is little compliance, right? So in terms of exemptions, why we don't endorse exemptions, and I think we have the same or very similar points of view on it,
Mhm.
because it is complying. And why is it complying? Because you are in the mercy of the
Mhm.
universities or your job place, wherever you're submitting your exemption,
Mhm.
for them to decide your fate.
Mhm.
You're basically asking for permission to participate in society.
Mhm.
You're asking for permission to get your rights.
Mhm.
And so, just looking at history, because that's what we can look at
Mhm.
to see if that shit
What we
works,
should look at.
that we should look
Yeah.
at, to see if this shit works, if
Yeah.
little compliance to a tyrant works or
Mhm.
to a tyrannical government. And like looking at Nazi Germany, for example, it did not begin with 1939
Yeah.
World War and then Germany's so fucking good that they just crush everybody.
Mhm.
It didn't start like that. What it started with first was they occupied Austria,
Mhm.
which was not part of Germany. So they just said, we're marching in because there's lots of Germans over there, and they support us. And so the Nazi Party just took their guns and they just walked in there, and nobody resisted them.
Mhm.
And but they had a Treaty of Versailles, so a little bit
Mhm.
history lesson here. They had a Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War One that Germany had these limitations in terms of military. They're not allowed to invade. They're not allowed to colonize.
Mhm.
And here is 1935,
Mhm.
1936. They just march into Austria,
Mhm.
and boom, Austria is part of Germany. Now, Chamberlain, who was the prime minister of Britain at the time, he was
Mhm.
kind of running the show of the opposition. And they were questioning, oh, should we do anything about this? Look, they violated the Treaty of Versailles that we
Mhm.
signed, right? So this is basically a tyrant saying, I'm not accepting these terms.
Mhm.
I just walked in and kind of testing the water, see what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And so what happened was they decided, oh, it's okay, we're going to leave it there. We're going to,
Mhm.
you know, I made a deal with Hitler and it's all good now.
Yeah.
So he comes back waving a paper that they signed this peace treaty with Hitler that he's not going to invade anymore.
Mhm.
This is the sand, the line in the sand. And then what happens next is they invade a part of their, so they start stationing troops in Sutherland, which is the land border with France. They're not allowed to have troops in that border according to Treaty of Versailles. But they just started stationing troops. And then here's another news story. Germany starts putting up troops in an area they're not allowed to. What did they do? Oh, it's okay. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it anymore. Next thing, they go and invade Czechoslovakia and they just take over the territory without a war, without a single gunshot. And then what did they do? Oh, it's okay. It will be fine. And that's how they gained their power over this whole time, because we were complying. Compliance feeds into the system. And they grow stronger and stronger. And then once you're starting to, okay, fine, now we'll resist once they start invading Poland.
Then you're too late.
It's too fucking late. Now they caused millions and millions of death and suffering throughout the war.
And it was very progressive. It didn't just happen.
No, it didn't just happen.
Yeah.
It didn't just happen all of a sudden. Oh, Hitler came to power, boom, World War II. No. Germany was in a shit situation at the time, and he pulled them out of it with their schemes and things like that. But the moral of the story is that compliance by other governments led to millions and millions of deaths. If the government said, no, you went into Austria that first time, you broke the Treaty of Versailles, and they said, no, we're coming in and we're seizing your possessions. We would never have World War II. We would not have millions of people dying. We would have prevented all the suffering.
And I that didn't happen that long ago. And I feel like, and everyone goes, that would never happen now. That would never happen now. It will if you let it, right? It will. I mean, not saying that exact thing is going to happen again, but a authoritarian government that wants to, have a dictatorship as authoritarian, government over the people, if they want that, and then you keep complying to the the progressive policies or whatever that they keep implementing, eventually it's going to get bad. That's just what history shows. And I don't know why we aren't using that as a lesson so that we don't repeat it.
Well, it's already bad. I don't like being told to wear a mask when I'm just going to get a coffee. I don't need a fucking mask. I have natural immunity. I've had COVID. There's no need for a mask because I don't believe they work, and studies show they don't. But that's a whole other discussion. What I'm trying to get at is our life is uncomfortable at the moment. Our life is not good. It's not 2019 or 2015 when we could have gone to the movies. I can't go to the movies legally because they check for Vax Pass. I cannot go into the university. I cannot study. I cannot pursue my dream career. So we're in a shit situation already. My question is, where's the line? Where's going to be the line? Where is the time when, at some point, Great Britain and France said, enough is enough, we're declaring war. When is our declaration of war going to start? When do we say, no, enough is enough? And when do people get fed up with it?
Well, I hope it's soon, because at some point it may be have gone too far. It may be too difficult to reverse
Maybe too
things.
late, yeah.
I mean, I can't emphasize it enough that we just need to start doing something about this. We need to say no. We need to say enough is enough. And we need to realize that where this is heading and why we need to stop this in its tracks now. It's already gone long enough, right? We have QR codes with our medical information on it to get into a restaurant. I would have never imagined that something like that would have happened, a year ago, 2 years ago. I would have told you you're crazy. But that's happening, We are citizens of Canada, and we cannot enter and exit the country freely. We can't do that. We are not allowed. We cannot leave the country.
No.
Do people not realize the significance of that? Not because, I can't go on vacation. It's like, if I wanted to get out of here, I can't get out of here, and neither can you. And that's a scary thing. That's scary. That's not okay, right? There are stories of people being denied certain surgeries because they're not vaccinated.
Yeah, I
How is
hear
that
those a lot.
okay, right? Like, sorry, what did you say?
I hear that a lot.
Oh,
Yeah, it's happening all over the
they
place
want
now.
to tax people that are unvaccinated. Like, when do we stop, right?
Where's the line? Yeah.
We have to, like,
So
I
it it's a crazy world. So what do we do about this? What do we do about getting? I mean, I really want to focus on the people who are even part of our organization and people who are part of other organizations
mm-hmm,
that do believe in this stuff and they know what's going on. How do we get them excited? How do we get them motivated? I bet most of those people still will wear masks when they go to
mm-hmm,
places. I bet most of those people are still submitting exemptions. They are still complying in the slightest way just to get by in society.
mm-hmm,
How do we motivate those people to do non-compliance? Because that seems to be something that we both agreed on the most effective way
mm-hmm.
to combat this, because it's really the antidote, but you need enough of the antidote to make it work. And so how do we get these people who are already on our side, they already know what's happening, to actually start doing something and get motivated, get pumped about freedom?
I think it's honestly quite difficult to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
It it's been difficult for us even to get people, out of their shell a little bit to come out to events or whatever it may be. It's going to be hard for them to get them to not comply or still so many students are just begging to have online school.
yeah,
Begging, like
yeah.
hands and knees begging the school for online school. And like I don't know how we can they're so focused on the the idea that the only thing that matters right now in their life is their education, that they're not willing to sacrifice anything to actually fight this,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. But I also sympathize with it. I definitely had that mindset when school started. I was begging for online accommodations, but somehow, for some reason, I was convinced otherwise. I
What was that reason for you? What convinced you?
Well, I think I started to realize the bullshit that was going on in schools and how I did not want to be a part of an institution like this at the current moment and in the state that we're in. And I don't want to give my money to these people. I don't want to give my time to these people. It was kind of that drove me to say, you know what? No, I'm not going to keep paying you the same amount of money to, learn online with a professor who recorded his lectures last year, you know? It's true.
It is,
I
yeah.
think it was mostly that kind of encouraged me to say no. I'm not I'm as of right now, my education is not the most important thing. Especially a shitty education in a with online learning where I'm practically isolated and was never around any people. I mean, I'm not going to keep doing that for some degree that may or may not benefit me in the future.
Mm.
I think that was kind of the thing for me. Everyone's different though. For some people, they're determined to become doctors or lawyers or whatever it may be, and you need school for that. But what's the point of going to school online right now if you're never going to be able to become a doctor or a lawyer because you're not vaccinated,
That's right.
right? So I think for
Or
me,
you don't want to disclose.
yes. For me, it was the education from this institution at the end of the day is useless if I'm going to continue to choose to not get vaccinated. So I might as well just take my time and energy to fight this rather than just give it to the school who doesn't give a shit about me anyways.
Hmm. Right. So you mentioned the reason why you really began fighting this and
Mm-hmm.
actively doing things. I mean, you're the host of the podcast, and you're so involved in the organization of, and you're not complying anywhere else. So the reason why you came to that realization was because freedom was more important to you
Mm-hmm.
than your shit
Mm-hmm.
education, so
Yeah.
to speak, right? So your immediate gratification, so to speak, as most people would find that to be more convenient, it's easier, and it's better for them. But I think those people did not realize the consequences that it has. If we're comparing this to our history, our most recent history and historical events that have happened, we know that compliance only feeds into the system. And so when you are wearing a mask going to the store, you're further feeding into your own suffering. When you try to beg for online even though you don't want it, you are further feeding into the suffering. And just to give a little bit of motivation, because I think most people, the reason why they don't do this stuff is because they think it doesn't work. I think people believe that if they walk into a store without a mask, it doesn't do shit.
I can definitely say
Right?
it does. I mean, for the most part, throughout the last 2 years, I've pretty much worn masks everywhere all the time. And then the few times recently on the subway or whatever it might be, I see people not wearing one, and I'm like, screw it. I'm not gonna wear it either. And it, for me, seeing other people, like, so that person that came into the store without a mask, even though it just maybe affected one person, right? Now I potentially go into a store with no mask and it affects another person.
That's right.
Right? And then they go into, you know what I mean? So even if it's a small change, it's something, I think.
Yes. So to motivate people to stop wearing their mask, the easiest thing you can do, because it's a visible thing. I'm non-compliant when you're not wearing a mask because you believe it doesn't work. And those are the people who they don't sympathize with the narrative. So I pulled up an experiment. It's called the Ash Conformity Experiment. It was done in the 1980s, I believe. No, 1950s. And it talks about conformity. So it's an experiment, psychological experiment. I'm just going to set the scene for this, and we're actually going to watch it. So the way the experiment worked was they had, I believe, 5 or 6 test subjects, or 5 or 6 of them were subordinates. So they were basically actors, and one person was a test subject. So this one person walks in, they sit down, and they think everybody's a test subject. And they basically were given lines, like one line and then 3 other lines to see which one matches, and you give the answer. And so all of these people give the wrong answer, and then so the one person who's actually the test subject conforms to that, because they're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, that's not equal, but hey, they all said it, so it must be equal. And then they just say what the group says. But then something interesting happens, because one person says the right answer from the 5 who said the wrong answer, and that one individual sided with the truth.
Interesting.
Yes, and it provides, statistics and things like that. I wanted to go over it because it could be inspirational for those who believe that non-compliance doesn't do shit. Taking off your mask doesn't do anything. It's too little of an act to do anything. But what it does is it amounts, right? You go out all the time. You go out to the store to get food. You go out to this place. You go out here. You don't submit exemptions. You speak to people. All of those things do so much, especially when we just get the 10% actually doing it.
100%. There's so much truth to that.
So let's take a look at the experiment.
Is it a video?
It's a video. It's a fascinating one. It's called the Ash Conformity Experiment.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the 5th person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
2, 2, 2,
2.
2, 3, 3, 3,
3.
But on the third trial, something happens.
2. 2. 2. 2. 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
1.
Ash found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
1. 1.
They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment. He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1. 1. 1. 2. 1. 2. 2. 2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2.
In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group. Here, the distortion is at the level of his response.
2. 2. 2. 2.
In the previous experiment, the naive subject stood alone against the group. In this variation, Ash gave the naive subject a partner, here seated in the third position, who also gives the correct response.
1. 1. 2. 1. 2.
With a partner, yielding drops to only 5% of the critical trials compared to 37% without a partner. Although subjects report warmth and good feeling toward the partner, they typically deny that he played a role in their own independence. The partnership variation shows that much of the power of the group came not merely from its numbers, but from the unanimity of its opposition. When that unanimity is punctured, the group's power is greatly reduced.
And there's the point, is when the unanimity is punctured, the group's power is greatly reduced.
So that's just proof that non-compliance, even if it makes a small difference, it makes a difference, right?
Right.
And then for the more people that it kind of spreads to, it just gets bigger and bigger, and then, right?
Yeah, because another thing I heard from a different psychologist, it was through an interview that we're doing, or something similar like a podcast, and this American psychologist mentioned that because she compared things to an abusive relationship, and she said the time when I get people to come out of abusive relationships and to really realize, because they will just deny it, obviously, same as most people are denying things now, is a visceral moment. And so you can be that light, you can be that visceral moment by just walking around in the store, being completely normal, without a mask on, smiling, and just talking to people. That could be a visceral moment for them to be like, holy shit, like, you can just do that, you know? I can just also take my mask off. And it might not lead them to take their mask off immediately, but it will create some sort of thinking inside, and it might be that visceral moment for them to go on and have a conversation at the dinner table with their family and say, hey, you know, I've been seeing a lot of people not wear the mask, and they're okay, right? Like, it could spark things. And what the studies show is it does. It absolutely does, because it reduces their power from the 87% conformity to only 5%. Because if there's one individual that does not comply, there's another individual that could side with the other person as a friend. And you could see in the video, the guy was like, oh, I got you. I could see it. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think this is exactly the kind of thing we have to implement when, you know, trying to end all of this. Even for the people who are vaccinated or who chose to disclose, you know, now's the time to say, you know, maybe I don't want this booster. And instead of going, you know, well, I already got the other 2, might as well get this one. If you really don't want it, don't get it. Yes, you are going to have to sacrifice things for that. Of course, we've all sacrificed our education, entertainment, being able to go to restaurants or movies or travel or whatever it may be. We've sacrificed friends and family, losing people because of this. We've sacrificed things because it's something we believe in and something that we think we have to change. So if this is something that you really want to change, you're going to unfortunately have to sacrifice things in order to achieve it. And whether that's, school, if you have to sacrifice a year of school or however long this takes in order to achieve this greater goal, that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to we have to say no, or nothing's going to change. You can always go back to school later.
Mm-hmm.
Always. But you can't undo a medical procedure. You can't undo, the consequences that all of this may have on our society in the future. You might, if it goes too far, we might not have the chance to reverse that, but we'll have the chance to go back to school at some point if we fight it,
If you give away your power, you give away your freedoms, good luck getting it back.
Yeah, everyone, or a good majority of people, think that if I keep giving all of this up, I'll eventually get it back, which is just totally wrong. That
we talked about Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
History did not, Hitler did not stop because
No.
others complied and were nice about it.
No.
That shit doesn't stop.
No, it
So-
just keeps getting worse, and they keep taking advantage of that compliance. It's not rocket science. It's quite logical. And unfortunately, the only way out of it is to sacrifice a few things for a while. Otherwise, we're going to be sacrificing a lot more in the future.
That's right.
Or losing a lot more in the future.
So just to summarize things, we talked a little bit about protests, as a lot of people are succumbing to that now. They are, they believe that is going to solve things, and they don't need to do anything except just support the protests. And that is not going to solve things. That is not going to save you. You have to save yourself. You have to take your mask off. You have to stop complying. You have to stop begging mommy government to give you things, because you deserve those things from the moment you're born, and you're born with those rights. And so when we summarize things about protests, I believe they're excellent in terms of gaining a group of people and getting people motivated
Building a community.
and building a community. But another aspect of this is going to be the civil disobedience and non-compliance, because that is something that has proven to work in history, and it's proven to work with literature and the research. And there's no reason for you not to do it. You will have to sacrifice, but we all
It's
have.
hard. It really is. It's a difficult thing to do. We all understand that, and I can sympathize with that. I struggle with it myself. But we have to all try our best to start doing that, or to continue doing that, and encourage as many people as possible to do it, because I think that's the only way of changing things. And one other thing that I think we forgot to mention or bring up was if we should fight this through the legal system. I don't think we didn't talk about that. I personally don't think that's the best way of solving all of this either, but what are your thoughts on
In terms of the legal system and the political route, so let's get a magical politician who will solve things. That shit doesn't work, in my opinion. And same with the judicial system. Is those things don't work. Why? Because our culture is the problem. It's not the person that's in power. It doesn't matter. Whatever person comes in power, they're still going to do the same shit because they want to gain the votes. And so those things I didn't even think of discussing in detail, because I don't believe they work, because our problem is not with those systems. Our problem is with the culture of the people.
100%?
And so just to conclude our podcast for today, I wanted to get the people excited, get the people motivated to do things, because that is what we're doing. And if you resonate with our message, visit cson.ca and reach out and join the community, join the fight. And so this is going to be our conclusion for today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.